Hi everybody, my name is Jordan Martin. I am mom to Cash, aka Cassius the Fighter on Instagram if you have not found us there already. Today, Cash is almost 2 years old, so we have come a very, very long way in these last 2 years. But I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit today about where it all started. So, I have tried to shoot my birth story video once before, but there was definitely some missing pieces I feel are important to the story. So I am here to tell all of that goodness today. Thank you for tuning in, and please let me know if you have any questions if I leave anything out. So, as I was saying, Cash is almost 2. So my original due date for Cash was July 26th of 2019. Now, right around probably about 37 weeks, I have been measuring normally as far as my stomach goes for the duration of my pregnancy. It was a very uneventful pregnancy. We didn't have a whole lot going on. Everything was normal. But around 37 weeks is when I started to measure, probably about a week or two ahead where I was supposed to be. So the original concern was, is this baby too big? Because I wanted to have a vaginal birth. So the goal, I'm barely 5 feet tall, if I am even 5 feet tall. So I'm a small person, so pushing out a big baby was probably not going to work. So we decided to go ahead and do an ultrasound and see if we could figure out exactly how big Cash was measuring around that time. And based off of that ultrasound, we did find he was probably about 5.5 pounds at the time, with about 3 weeks left to go until my due date. So it wasn't that the baby was too big. It was actually that my amniotic fluid, I had way too much of it. And we'll talk about kind of how that played out, during labor and delivery in just a second. But they basically found that I had too much fluid, and Cash was flipping upside down and right side up, basically at least once every day or so. So he was all over the place. It was like a swimming pool for him in there. And the concern was, when my water breaks, if we let it happen naturally, where and how will he land? So that was too big a risk to take. So we decided to go ahead and do the induction. So the induction was scheduled for July 22nd of 2019. This is at a military hospital. I won't name which one, but this is at a military hospital that we lived nearby at the time. So when I went to go be induced, they had me come in at 7 o'clock in the morning. And that was when they started with IV fluids, just to make sure everything is good. That's when they started. They started Pitocin pretty early. And then they also started a balloon catheter to see if they could kind of force me to dilate a little bit. So going back and looking through my text messages, it seems like after the first 12 hours, so that evening of me checking in on the 22nd, I was only at about 1.5 centimeters dilated. So it was already looking like this was going to be a very, very slow progression. So the next morning, they didn't measure me again until the very next day. And I think I probably maxed out about maybe 3 centimeters, and I stayed there for the rest of the day. Now, throughout the night, they were coming in and repositioning me every couple of minutes. I didn't really get any rest that night. They just said every time I kind of started to fall asleep, baby's heart rate would drop and I need to readjust. So we did that all night. So with the measuring up the next day at 3 centimeters, it was a little discouraging. I wasn't dilating fast enough for anybody to feel like this was going to be able to be a vaginal birth, which at that point I had been waiting so long, I was just ready for it to be over, so that's fine with me. So after coming back and checking, I want to say around, they said they would make a final decision at 4:30 that afternoon. They would give me a chance to dilate until then, and if it wasn't looking good, then C-section was on the table. So of course, 4:30 rolled around and I was still stuck at 3 centimeters. So they decided emergency C-section is the best bet here. Now, throughout the day, Cash's heart rate was kind of up and down. It was kind of unclear what he was gonna do. So every time they repositioned me, he would come back up. So they figured it was fine. So when we finally decide on the emergency C-section, I let the whole family know that that was the plan, and the only person who could be in the operating room, obviously, was myself and Cash's father. So they take me to the operating room first. They put they have these straps that they strap your legs down to the table when you have a C-section, which I didn't know about, but I guess I should have assumed as much. So they put me on the operating room table and they strapped me down. They put a face mask on me and turned oxygen on. And I was telling them, I was like, I don't know what's in here, but I'm not feeling very well. They're like, you feel like you're going to be sick? And I'm like, yes. They're like, you're going to throw up. And I'm like, yes, I'm going to throw up. And within 10 seconds, I just leaned over, still strapped to the table, and I threw up into some like random plastic bag that somebody handed me. I don't know. I guess I've heard of people throwing up after having oxygen put on them before. I don't know. I just immediately was very sick. So I threw up what I did have in my system, but considering I wasn't able to eat during labor and delivery, it was just like maybe water and Jello. So it was definitely not fun up until that point. And at that point, I was really getting nervous because I didn't expect to be in the OR by myself at any point. I had never been in an OR before. So the idea of now, like, I'm about to have major surgery here, I'm terrified. So ultimately, they did end up bringing Cash's father into the room before they started doing anything. And I had my epidural and all that around the time they gave me the Pitocin. So I had everything hooked up basically and ready for my spinal tap. So there wasn't a whole lot that needed to be done. It was just a matter of go in, get the baby, and get out. Now, when they put the curtain up, nobody said they were starting surgery. Nobody was speaking to me. Nobody was kind of walking me through anything. I just remember they poked me and they're like, does this hurt? And I was like, no, I don't feel anything. And then a couple seconds later, they're like, okay, baby's out. And I was like, baby's out? And they're like, yeah, baby's out. So my Cash's father, he tapped on my shoulder and he pointed over the curtain. And I look up and there's Cash just sitting over the curtain. They're holding him up. But he has this look on his face where he's like terrified. Like, I've seen him look like this since then, but I've never seen a baby look like that before then. He was genuinely like, he just looked like he was like in shock. I don't know. It was a very, very weird moment. And I remember thinking about it in that moment, like, something's off. I don't know what, but something's off. So they take him away to go work on him and clean him up and all that stuff. At that point, everything is still fairly normal. But that is when things started to kind of take a turn. So as I'm just laying there waiting for them to close me up, I'm still holding on to Cash's father's hand. Like, I'm still scared. Like, I haven't had any pain up until this point, completely painless process, which I am grateful for up until that point. Then at that point, the doctor, I feel like a tugging, like in my torso, like in my lower stomach. And at that point, I was just like, I knew they had told me I shouldn't be feeling any pain, but I was like, this is genuine pain. I don't like this. So I feel the tugging again, and I'm like, what is that? And she was like, I'm sorry, your stomach muscles are so tight, your uterus won't come out. I need to get it out. So I'm like, okay. So her only solution, since it wasn't coming out, was just pull it harder. And I suddenly just became very aware of the fact that I was strapped to this table. I could feel the straps pulling against my legs because at this point, forget any spinal tap, any epidural, any of this. I'm in so much pain, I am getting off of this table. So I feel my legs pulling at the straps on the table. I feel whatever water that was left over, whatever amniotic fluid that was still in me, I feel it come out onto this table. I am panicking and I am screaming. And she's like, I need you to calm down. I need you to calm down. but steadily pulling my uterus as hard as she can because she cannot get it out. So I'm screaming, and in this moment, I'm fully convinced I'm going to die right here. Like, I've never felt a pain so awful in my life, and I was terrified because nobody seemed to be concerned by how much pain I was in. It was just kind of, calm down, I need to do this. And I hear the doctor who's doing the C-section. She says, give her something to calm her down, and that's to the anesthesiologist. I didn't realize it, but apparently that's code for knock her out. She's moving too much. So there's a big blank in what happened that day for me that was filled in through medical records and Cash's father, who was there. So based off of what I have read, essentially after I was knocked out, Cash stopped breathing, and they got him back, and then immediately he flatlines again. Now this time they intubate him, which apparently was very difficult, and that had always ended up being a difficult thing for him after that point. He's a very difficult kid to intubate, apparently. So they had to do chest compressions and an intubation that second time. And then they took him to the NICU for that hospital. So as I'm waking up, all of that has already played out, and both families are in the room. I'm very confused as to what is happening. And everybody's just like, the doctor's going to come talk to you. The doctor's going to come talk to you. And I don't see my son, so I'm like, that feels bad. I don't know what that's about, but that feels bad. So the doctor comes in, and she just kind of sits down, and she like takes off her mask and stuff, and she's just like, sorry if I traumatized you back there. Your stomach muscles are just really tight, and I needed to get your uterus out, so. And I was just like, okay, well, I don't think I'm traumatized, so I guess it's fine. Which of course I later came to find out that wasn't really the case. I have had many nightmares about that moment. But it was a very nonchalant. It was just like, oh, sorry about it. And she knew how much pain I was in. She knew how scary that was for me, for her to come in and lead on an apology. But after she apologized, she did say, your son is in a NICU. We don't have what it takes to take care of him here. So he will be being transferred to a different hospital, and you have to stay here. So they essentially were like, well, we're going to pack him up. We'll bring him in to say goodbye to you. But the transport team is already on the way to get him, and he is leaving tonight. So mind you, up until that point, I still had not met him. I saw him over the curtain during the C-section, and then they basically gave me this, he wasn't doing well, he's got to leave, and then I saw his foot in an incubator across the room before he left, and that's kind of where the birth story ends, and a very, very long NICU journey begins, which is something I'll get into some other time, but yeah. So I personally now do feel hesitant kind of dealing with military hospitals now because of the care that I received there and some of the care my son received in a different military hospital later on. But those are all things I will come to talk about at some point, hopefully soon. But I do thank y'all for watching. Please ask any questions that you have. And I will answer them to the best of my ability. Again, this is Jordan Martin, mom to Cassius the Fighter on Instagram. Please feel free to follow us and tag along on our journey. We love you. Take care and be safe.